For centuries, wood ruled the ocean. But on a single Saturday in 1862, the United States Navy's most powerful fleet discovered their ships were nothing more than floating matchsticks. The Confederate answer to the blockade wasn't a ship. It was a terrifying, low-slung, iron coffin designed for one purpose: total annihilation. The American Civil War is a brutal conflict fought in fields of mud and blood, but a hidden war is raging on the water, a war that will determine the fate of a continent. The wooden warship has been the ultimate expression of global power, a symbol of majesty and might. Yet in the quiet, sun-drenched waters of Hampton Roads, Virginia, that long reign is about to end. A terrifying secret, cloaked in iron, is ready to launch. In the early months of the war, the Union Navy maintained a suffocating blockade of southern ports, especially at Hampton Roads, Virginia, the vital nexus leading to the Confederate capital of Richmond. The key to this strategy were the mighty wooden frigates, the USS Cumberland and the USS Congress, floating fortresses of thick, triple-layered oak, backed by dozens of heavy cannons. These were the pride of the fleet, magnificent ships of the line that embodied all the naval tradition the world had ever known. They were built to absorb cannon fire and deliver devastating broadsides, manned by sailors steeped in the certainty that no enemy could pierce their sturdy hulls. This confidence, this unwavering faith in the age of wood, was exactly what the Confederacy was counting on. The commanders of the Union ships were comfortable, perhaps complacent. Their enemy was blockaded, starved of resources, and struggling to field an army, let alone a navy capable of challenging the Union's dominance. Yet, hidden in the nearby Norfolk Navy Yard, a desperate act of military engineering was nearing completion. Rumors of a monstrous southern ship circulated among the Union crews, dismissed as the lunatic fantasies of desperate men. Why? Because the very concept violated every established rule of naval architecture. Iron, they believed, was too heavy. It would sink or be too slow to fight. The only true fighting ship had to be made of sturdy oak, canvas, and brass. The stakes could not have been higher. If the Confederacy could break the Union blockade, they would not only cripple the North's war economy, but also open the door for European intervention. More immediately, the Union fleet at Hampton Roads was the last line of naval defense protecting Washington, D.C. and New York. If the blockade was destroyed, the Confederate ironclad could sail unchallenged up the coast and bombard the North's greatest cities into submission. The Union commanders, in their comfortable, traditional ships, were utterly unprepared for the silent, mechanical revolution about to greet them. They had placed their faith in history, and history was about to betray them. Their mighty, beautiful wooden walls were not fortresses. They were fuel for a floating funeral pyre. The wooden navy, for all its splendor, was a gallows waiting for the drop, relying on a technology that was now centuries out of date. The sailors slept soundly under their canvas sails, unaware that they were about to become martyrs to the Iron Age, serving their country aboard the final, most glorious relics of a vanishing world. The Confederacy was not building a ship. They were building a revolutionary weapon of terror, a machine designed not to fight, but to obliterate. In the chaos of the captured and burned Norfolk Navy Yard, the Confederacy found its unlikely blueprint for revolution, the charred, scuttled hulk of the USS Merrimack. This was no magnificent new build. It was a salvage operation born of utter necessity. The engineers and shipwrights, led by Chief Constructor John Luke Porter, stared into the burned-out remnants of the heavy wooden frigate and saw not ruin, but raw material. Their government needed a ship to break the blockade, But they had no steel mills, no time, and no proper shipyard capacity. They had to innovate, and their innovation was an act of engineering desperation. The resulting warship, officially christened the CSS Virginia, was a marine Frankenstein. The burnt hull was cut down to the waterline, and upon it a 30-foot-high casemate was erected, slanted at a radical 36-degree angle. This structure was designed not to absorb a blow, but to deflect it, and it was armored with 4 inches of rolled iron plate, scavenged railway track, and whatever scrap metal could be melted and bolted down. The effect was terrifying. A low-slung black citadel floating on the water, a stark contrast to the tall, proud lines of the Union frigates. She was a naval nightmare, completely lacking the grace of a traditional ship. Life aboard the Virginia was hell. The repurposed steam engine, always unreliable even on the Merrimack, was now overburdened by thousands of pounds of added iron. The ship wallowed sluggishly in the water, a barely mobile fortress, and the ventilation system was notoriously poor. Below decks, the air was a stifling mixture of coal smoke, oil fumes, and the perpetual damp smell of unwashed bodies. Yet, the men serving on her, led by the fierce Captain Franklin Buchanan, were galvanized by a sense of historical purpose. They knew their vessel was a flawed, fragile experiment, but they also knew its single devastating strength, its imperviousness to the guns of the enemy. This metal monster was barely seaworthy, but her crew knew that if she could stay afloat for just one afternoon, she would rewrite the history of warfare. The armament was equally innovative. Instead of a large number of light guns, the Virginia carried a few massive rifled cannon, including 2 7-inch Brook rifles positioned for fore and aft fire. But her most terrifying weapon was ancient, yet newly lethal, a vicious iron ram projecting from her prow. This was her final, brutal mission statement. If her guns could not pierce the wood, the ship itself would. She was designed to be a battering ram that could smash the century-old notion of naval warfare to pieces. The immense risk was evident to everyone involved. The Virginia was unstable, mechanically temperamental, and could easily be lost if she took on too much water. She was, in many ways, a mission of extreme risk, but the Confederacy had nothing to lose. They had to win the war on the water, or forfeit it entirely. On the morning of March 8, 1862, the black, brooding shape of the Virginia cast off her moorings and began her agonizingly slow journey toward the Union fleet at Hampton Roads. The sailors of the wooden ships were about to learn that they were no longer fighting a war against wood and sail, but against iron and pure, desperate engineering genius. The morning of Saturday, March 8, 1862, broke quiet and sunny over Hampton Roads. It was an ordinary day for the Union blockade. The veteran crew of the USS Congress and the USS Cumberland enjoyed the calm, unaware that the rules of their world were about to be rewritten in fire and blood. Then, a low black shape emerged from the fog and haze near the mouth of the Elizabeth River. The strange craft was the CSS Virginia. The laughter quickly curdled into paralyzed terror. The Virginia, riding low on the water, bore down on the Union line with the grim, unstoppable momentum of a natural disaster. The Congress and Cumberland were the first targets, positioned directly in her path. The Union ships opened fire with their full, devastating broadsides. The cannons, which had vanquished dozens of conventional vessels, roared, and a heavy, 32-pound solid shot slammed directly into the Virginia's iron-plated casemate. The effect was nothing less than surreal. Instead of splintering the hull, the cannonballs struck the sloped armor, producing brilliant sparks, then ricocheting harmlessly off into the water, leaving little more than minor dents and bruises. The Union crews were stunned, their entire operational doctrine invalidated in a single, terrifying instant. Meanwhile, the Virginia's massive rifled guns returned fire. The heavy shot found the soft, exposed wood of the Union frigates. The first impacts were catastrophic, tearing massive, ragged holes through the oak hulls and turning the ship's interiors into slaughterhouses of splinters, steam, and flying bodies. This was not the naval warfare they knew. This was utter devastation. The Virginia focused first on the USS Cumberland, a ship whose defiance cost her dearly. Captain Buchanan ordered the ultimate attack. The Confederate ironclads surged forward, his massive iron ram piercing the Cumberland's wooden hull below the waterline. The sound, heard even on the distant shore, was described as a giant, horrifying tear, the sound of the wooden age ending. Water rushed into the Cumberland at an unstoppable rate, and she began to founder, her crew still firing their guns until the last possible moment, bravely going down with their colors flying. The Virginia was not attacking ships. She was dismantling an entire age. And the most terrifying part? Her day was not yet done. Next, the Congress was savaged, reduced to a blazing, unmanageable wreck by Virginia's relentless shelling. By the afternoon, the carnage was absolute. Two of the largest, most powerful wooden warships in the Union fleet had been obliterated for the loss of a few dents on the Confederate ironclad. The remaining Union fleet fled to the shallow waters, where the Virginia's deep draft prevented her from following. The strategic consequences were immediate and terrifying. The blockade was shattered, and the path to the North's major cities lay open. The Virginia, her mission complete for the day, retired to wait for morning. Her arrival had not been a victory. It had been a revelation. The world's navies were now obsolete. If you find this cinematic style compelling, please consider subscribing to the channel. We analyze the moments in history when technology and courage collide. The Union officers, watching the smoking wreckage from the shore, knew this was not merely a military defeat. It was the end of naval history as they understood it. The wooden empires had vanished in one afternoon, and if nothing could stop Virginia, the entire trajectory of the war and the world would shift. But across the frantic waters, a small, strange ship was rushing south, the Union's frantic, desperate answer to the Iron Monster. The news of Virginia's rampage sent a shockwave of genuine panic across the Union. In Washington, D.C., cabinet members feared the Black Monster could sail up the Potomac and shell the White House before nightfall. The Navy Department knew they had only one hope, a controversial, untested experiment that the establishment had ridiculed as Ericsson's folly. This was the USS Monitor, a creation as radical as the Virginia, built in a desperate 100 days by the brilliant, temperamental Swedish engineer John Ericsson. Ericsson's design threw out every rule of naval architecture. The Monitor was not tall and proud. She had an almost non-existent freeboard, riding extremely low in the water, like a cheese box on a raft, making her almost impossible to strike. She was built entirely of iron, with a sealed, windowless hull. Her revolutionary feature was a single, revolving turret. This massive cylinder, encased in 8 inches of solid iron, housed 2 enormous 11-inch Dahlgren smoothbore cannons. It meant the Monitor didn't need to turn its whole body to aim its guns. The guns could spin, giving her a tactical freedom no other ship in the world possessed. The challenge was not only in the design, but in the timeline. With the Virginia already proving her devastating capability, the Union pushed Ericsson and the builders to the breaking point. Hundreds of men worked around the clock in the Brooklyn Navy Yard, driven by an urgency that bordered on madness. The ship was completed in just 100 days, a feat of industrial frenzy unmatched at the time. Yet, the rush meant the ship was untested, unproven, and fundamentally dangerous. Her frantic voyage south, commanded by Lieutenant John L. Warden, was a nightmare. The low hull that made her invincible in battle made her perilously vulnerable in the open sea. During a storm off the coast of Delaware, the ship nearly foundered. Water poured through the hatchways, the pumps failed, and the crew struggled in the cramped, airless interior, battling to save their unique vessel from the sea itself. The men were tossed violently against the iron walls, fighting for air and life in a metallic coffin, the heat and fumes unbearable. They had to abandon their steering station entirely, relying on a tugboat to pull them through the worst of the storm. The ship, designed to save the Union, almost drowned her own crew. It was a harrowing 90-hour race against time, and they had barely arrived before the Virginia came back for the confrontation. Against all odds, the Monitor survived the passage. She arrived at Hampton Roads in the dead of night, late on March 8th, just hours after the Virginia had completed its destruction. The Union commanders, demoralized and facing total annihilation, saw the small, strange vessel arrive, and a wave of disbelief mixed with pure, desperate relief washed over them. They did not know if this iron folly could actually fight, but it was their only answer. The world had gone from wooden masts to iron plating in a single, terrifying afternoon, and the very next morning, the two greatest technological experiments of the war would face off in a duel of titans. We spend months verifying the historical details and crafting these narratives. If you appreciate the effort and accuracy, please leave a comment with what historical battle you'd like us to cover next. The Virginia was coming back to finish the destruction, to turn the remaining wooden ships to kindling. But now, when the sun rose, she would find her path blocked not by the soft, yielding hulls of a past era, but by a metallic challenge from the future. The Confederate terror had met its technological match, and history was about to witness the first ever battle of the ironclads. The sun rose on Sunday, March 9th, 1862, illuminating a calm, expectant sea. The CSS Virginia was back, slow-moving and confident, ready to finish the job begun the day before. The officers on the Virginia's armored deck were certain of their victory, but as they approached the grounded frigate USS Minnesota, a small, dark shadow detached itself from the coastline and moved directly into their path. The Virginia's commander, Lieutenant Catesby Jones, stared at the approaching vessel in utter astonishment. It was bizarre, unlike anything ever seen. A low, flat deck with a single cylinder turret in the center. This was the USS Monitor. The confrontation, when it came, was a moment of profound realization. The Virginia was no longer the only iron ship in the world. The world had gone from two-dimensional wooden warfare to three-dimensional metallic combat overnight. The duel began. The Virginia lumbered forward, its heavy guns opening fire. Cannonballs meant to shatter oak simply struck the Monitor's thick iron hull and ricocheted with a deafening clang. The Monitor responded, its revolutionary turret spinning, bringing its massive 11-inch guns to bear. The engagement was fought at astonishingly close range, sometimes less than 100 yards, a close-quarters slugfest that revealed the shocking absurdity of iron versus iron. The crews of both vessels endured hell. Inside the Monitor's turret, the concussion of its own guns was deafening, the air thick with smoke and the metallic smell of burnt powder. Every time a heavy round from the Virginia struck the iron, The men inside were slammed with a ringing vibration that felt like a blow from a gigantic hammer. The crew of the Virginia suffered too, the interior of their casemate turning into a terrifying echo chamber as their shells rebounded. Neither ship could inflict any significant, disabling damage on the other. The armor of both vessels proved too strong. For 4 grinding hours, the two-iron giants circled, fired, and maneuvered. Lieutenant Worden, fighting blind from a pilot house at the bow, navigated his unusual craft with relentless bravery. The battle reached its climax when Worden took a position to study Virginia's defenses. A shell struck the viewing slit of his pilot house, exploding directly in his face. Blinded and seriously injured, he was forced to relinquish command. For a terrifying 20 minutes, the Monitor pulled back, temporarily directionless, leading the Confederates to believe they had won. But the Monitor was not defeated. Her second-in-command, Lieutenant Samuel Dana Green, resumed the attack. The Virginia was also severely damaged, having lost its heavy ram in the previous day's battle and taking a battering to its smokestack and hull plates. Critically, the tide was dropping, threatening to run the deep-draft Virginia aground. Unable to overcome the Monitor, and critically short on coal and time, the Virginia was forced to retreat, sailing back toward the safety of the Confederate-controlled waters. The fight was a tactical draw, with neither ship overcoming the other. But strategically, it was a colossal victory for the Union. The Virginia had failed in its mission to break the blockade and destroy the Union fleet. The age of the ironclad had been affirmed, and the path to the North's cities was securely closed. If you know someone who loves military history, please take a moment to share this video with them. The Virginia never sailed out again to fight the Monitor, being scuttled 2 months later to prevent its capture. The Battle of Hampton Roads, though a military stalemate, was a singular moment of technological and naval revolution. The wooden empires had truly vanished, and the world was now forced to prepare for a new, unforgiving age of iron and steel. The duel at Hampton Roads was more than a battle. It was a global announcement. The entire world's navies, built upon centuries of tradition, were instantly rendered obsolete. When news of the battle reached London and Paris, the dominant naval powers of Great Britain and France immediately halted all ongoing construction of wooden warships. The cost and design of future fleets were irrevocably changed in the span of 4 hours. The age of iron had arrived, and the Virginia and the Monitor were its ferocious, flawed, and terrifying pioneers. The two ships, though short-lived, left behind a profound legacy. The CSS Virginia, having proven the complete vulnerability of wooden ships, had ensured that no major sea power would ever again rely on a wood-hulled vessel for the front line of combat. She forced the world to acknowledge the defensive power of armor. The USS Monitor, with her rotating turret, defined the future of naval offense. Her design became the template for an entirely new class of warships, the Monitor class, and influenced the development of naval artillery platforms for decades to come. Neither hero ship survived the year. The Virginia, trapped after the Union captured Norfolk, was scuttled by her own crew on May 11th, 1862, to prevent her falling into Northern hands, a tragic and necessary end for the desperate, beautiful monstrosity. The Monitor, after her moment of glory, was lost later that year in a storm off Cape Hatteras, New Carolina, her low profile proving too vulnerable to the violence of the open Atlantic. She was lost with 16 members of her crew. But their brief lives had done their work. They had fought the single most important naval duel in history, establishing that iron, not oak, would rule the waves. The men who sailed these iron coffins were pioneers and patriots. John Worden, blinded in the battle, recovered and was hailed as a hero. John Ericsson, the eccentric engineer, was finally vindicated, his name secured in history. But the greatest heroes were the hundreds of sailors, north and south, who fought in the extreme hellish conditions inside those hulls, risking their lives aboard ships that were as revolutionary as they were unreliable. They were the first ironclad sailors, the men who truly ushered in the new age. The Battle of Hampton Roads proved that necessity is the mother of invention, that technological innovation can trump overwhelming material and traditional power, and that history on the water isn't measured by the height of the masts, but by the thickness of the plating. The day the Virginia destroyed the wooden frigates was the day naval warfare changed forever, ending the centuries-long rule of the wooden empire and ushering in the unforgiving industrial age of iron and steel. If you want to see more stories about the incredible battles and technological turning points that shaped our world, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. And let us know in the comments what piece of history you think deserves to be told next.